talk about vendors.
So vendor bookings, right?
Yeah.
We're making our game plan. Vendor bookings, that's one of the first things you're going to think about is, okay, well, who's going to actually bring this to life?
Well, it's the biggest piece, right?
Exactly. And where can you find good vendors?
I know the answer to this. Is it Bustld?
Oh, yeah.
That's right. They're vetted for you, and you can instantly match to them. You just have to take our quick 2-minute quiz.
That was a great shameless plug.
Shameless.
Yeah, that was like next level.
Okay,
so with vendor bookings, who gets booked first?
Okay, so I actually wrote down the list because I didn't want to forget anybody. So this is the general order you're going to go in. Your venue and planner kind of happen simultaneously. If you're looking for a full service planner, you typically book your full service planner first. But if you're not sure if you're going to have a full service planner, you might book them after your venue. So those are two kind of the first ones.
See, we're already in disagreement because I would have started with Baker.
Okay, let's stick to my list.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree.
We'll agree to disagree. Okay, so then after that, you're going to want to book your photographer. That's a big one. Entertainment, so whether that's your DJ or your band, you really want to start with these like first 4 that can only do one wedding at a time, so you can get your the person of your choice, and they're not booked for your date, and then you can move into the people, the vendors who can take multiple weddings in a weekend. So next would be caterer, florist, rental company. Videographer kind of falls somewhere in this as well. If video is super important to you, I'd book them earlier in the process.
And we've talked about this. Video tends to get pushed towards the end, and it's similar to a photographer. Like, you really need to be thinking about them way sooner.
Yeah. So most couples end up booking them later, but if you really want video, I would put that next to like entertainment and florist.
Videographers typically, I find, don't take quite as many weddings as a photographer would.
True.
So that's another thing to consider. And there tends to be less available.
Yeah, this is all true. So think about...
I'm just fear-mongering over here.
And videographers are like so awesome. So yeah, you should really strongly consider that.
Yeah.
Okay. See, this is why I had to make a list because I knew we would get off topic.
You mean me?
Whatever. Yeah. Same difference. Baker is typically next. So there you go. There's your cake tasting.
Well.
And then your beauty team and officiant if you're not using someone through, like if you're not getting married in a place of worship. And then kind of your last big ticket items would be transportation, any kind of enhancements to your wedding, like a champagne wall, which, I'm obsessed with, a photo booth, a donut wall, any kind of like extras to kind of personalize your day would be kind of that last big ticket item that vendor you book.
I noticed, and maybe you don't consider it, but you like attire. Where would you put that?
Attire is going to happen a little earlier in the process, typically 10 months out, 8 to 10 months out.
But this is wedding day.
This is wedding day team.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay. Cool.
Exactly.
Okay. So how far apart would you book vendors?
So there's not really like a set time. I would say there's like deadlines of when you want to book each of these vendors by. But my biggest piece of advice is just don't overload yourself. So focus on like 1 to 2 vendors at a time. It just makes it less overwhelming, and it makes sure you don't make any mistakes. You don't have like so many decisions you have to make and you feel like decision overload.
Yeah.
So I would focus on like booking like one of these big vendors at a time. Once you've booked them and signed the contract and paid, then you update your budget. And then you move on to the next category. This is also a good way to stay on budget. If you book everyone at once, you're going to book everyone, you're not necessarily going to be paying attention to your budget, and you could quickly blow through your money and then not have things left for some of those vendors at the end, like video and baker and things that are equally as important.
Yeah. So have you ever had a couple that just went and was booking like everything all at once? And like,
yes.
How did that make, not you, how it would make you feel? I know how it make you feel. But how did it make them feel? Like
overwhelmed,
right?
Yeah, it makes you feel overwhelmed because you feel like you have all these things you have to do. And I think people think they have to book everything right away, which can sometimes feel really good because you get a lot of things checked off the list. But in the moment, it just feels like really overwhelming. And you have to make a decision. You're meeting with 2 or 3 options for every category. I mean, that's a lot of categories we just talked about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of meetings. You're doing these on the weekends or after work. And like, this is like all your free time, and just quickly can feel like wedding planning is taking over your life. So don't feel like you have to book everything right away. like I said, you want to do those people who can only take one wedding at a time first. Especially think about what your priorities are. You know, if getting like this specific band is your number one priority, you should book them maybe a little earlier even than your photographer. Yeah. So whatever your priorities are is really where you want to focus on that.
Yeah, and I know I've seen you have couples in the past that maybe had longer engagements, like 18, 24-month engagements, booked everything on the front end, and then by the time wedding day came around, they were like, oh, my taste changed. That's a long time if you think about it. It's a long time,
especially for like things like flowers and rentals where you might change your mind, you know, especially as the trends change and your tastes change.
Colors change, yep.
So you want to think about those things before you get too far in the process.
Yeah. Okay, so then what if I don't get a planner from the start? Well, first off, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but yeah, I agree.
Slightly. But no, seriously though, if you don't get a planner from the start, like what should you do?
So definitely hire a day of, month of, coordinator, you know, wedding day management. All these different terms kind of mean the same thing. Typically they start to work with you anywhere from, 4 to 8 weeks out. So coordinator is what I personally like to call it. But I would say you're gonna want someone on the day of to manage the day.
Right.
And that's what these people will do. They'll help you build your timeline and finalize your final logistics, and then execute your actual wedding day. And those are typically booked about 6 to 8 months. Actually, you don't actually wait until that kind of final push, because a lot of them will be booked up at that point. So I would say in that 6 to 8 month range.
So, and I think we probably touched on this in an earlier episode, but as far as like, when you have a family member that says, I can do this, you don't spend the money. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to light all the candles. I'm going to make sure the escort cards are out and all those things. Yeah.
I think it's really hard to rely on a family member in these instances because they want to celebrate with you on wedding day. So even if you don't want to hire like a, professional coordinator, one, you need to make sure with your venue, if you have to hire someone with like insurance and license and all of those things, and what their requirements are, because a lot of venues require that. But if there's flexibility on that, then, I would steer you clear of a family member. I would say someone who isn't as close to the wedding, because they're going to be pulled in a million directions on wedding day that they don't even know about. And it's really hard because then they're not going to be able to enjoy. So I would recommend someone outside of family to manage the day of.
Yeah.
And you. Please don't let it be you.
It's not in everybody's budget.
No. And I think that's totally reasonable. But I would find someone else who's not a major part. Like, it can't be mom.
Yeah.
Or really even like a close aunt. Like, it needs to be like a friend of a friend, or, maybe like one of your girlfriends who isn't a part of the bridal party or something like that. So just things to consider, and make sure that with your venue, it's even allowed.
And they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
It's a lot more work than you think than just lighting candles. Like,
it is. It's a full day.
Yeah. Okay. So then in terms of, what do I need to know to book vendors?
So it's definitely going to vary based on the vendor type. Obviously, the most important thing you need to know is your date, and your location. So you with a planner, if you're hiring a full service planner, then you might know none of these things. And that's something to ask about for sure if you're hiring them on the front end before you book a date in a venue. But I would say, like, once you book your planner and your venue, your date and location, you're going to need that for all the rest of your vendors. You're also going to, for instance, for caterer, you're going to need an estimated guest count. For florist, you're going to need an estimated number of tables. For beauty, you're going to need an estimated number of services. So, it's definitely going to vary. But that's one of the things about making sure you don't book it too far in advance, because you want to have an idea of what those answers are going to be.
Gotcha. So then actually let me ask a question. So you don't have a planner or a coordinator.
Yeah.
And let's say hypothetically you're at a venue like a museum, and they don't let you in until like 4 or 5, until after all the public is gone. How would the couple know that? How would other vendors know that? Like, how do they make sure things like that are so critical? Because like a DJ needs at least an hour to set up, I would think, right? Maybe more, maybe less. But like things like that, like how, if you don't have a planner, how do you, like, there's, I feel like there's 1,000, I'm stressing everybody out, but I feel like there's
stressing me out.
Yeah, there's 1,000 things that you have to think about.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times venues like that will require someone, so that's good.
So the venue is going to really hammer home.
There's a reason that your venue is requiring a coordinator. It's not to add money to your budget. It's because of things like this.
Yep.
But no matter, and we actually did a podcast on timelines, so we'll make sure to link to that. But go back and listen to that. I would say you definitely want to think about like what time the venue opens when you're walking through the venue, like before you even book it, and make sure you're kind of communicating that information. If it's something unusual, I'll say generally 2-hour minimum for setup time, so that you know that. So if it's a place where you only have 1 hour of setup time and you have like a 14-piece band, or for instance, if you have your ceremony and then you're moving everybody out for cocktail hour and flipping the space, and you have a big 14-piece band that's going to have to set up in 45 minutes to an hour, that's something you need to communicate and know up front, because it can create a lot of stress later on, closer to the day.
Yeah, I imagine.